Recently, I put out a video talking about the bike that I have sworn to never ever sell, and I stand by that. I genuinely never will. But once that video went out, it did get me thinking, if I didn't have such a deep affiliation with that bike, what are the things that I might otherwise be ignoring and are actually some pretty blatant signs that I should, in actual fact, change my bike? So here are 8 signs that you should probably replace your bike. Much like cars, bikes need maintaining, and also like cars, sometimes the cost of maintenance is higher than the value of the bike itself. It's at the point at which the repair costs more than the cost of maintenance that it doesn't really make too much sense to keep ploughing money into something that is only going to keep costing you more money. The caveat to this is that if the cost of repair does exceed the value of the bike, but the cost of maintenance means that you will get a decent number of extra years, then it could potentially be worth it. Just be prepared for a similar service cost further down the line. Now, how far down the line purely depends on how well you look after your bike and how much you use it. Depending on what is actually wrong with it, especially if it's something pretty fundamental, buying a new bike will mean that you rid yourself of any pesky gremlins, and you'll start with a blank canvas. This is also important to consider when buying a second-hand bike. It may be new to you, but it's not brand new, so do be careful, and when in doubt, get some advice from someone in the know. In my early years of taking cycling seriously, I absolutely loved racing. As such, an aggressive geometry is all that I wanted. A slam stem with turned-in hoods on narrow bars was the order of the day. However, since I've now hung up my racing wheels and I've turned my attention to taking on longer rides and a fresh set of challenges, a race bike is no longer the correct tool for the job. Instead, something which is a bit more suited to my new style of riding is absolutely needed. A slightly longer wheelbase with wider tyres and a bit more stack suited my needs perfectly. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that since road bikes have been created to be perfect for every style of riding out there, then it's worth considering that you may be missing out on using the right tool for the job. For example, you don't really want to be using an endurance bike for racing or vice versa. You'll get your most out of the time on the road when you're riding the right bike. Sometimes it's not your style of riding that changes, but instead, it's your body that does. It's no secret that as we get older, we lose some of our flexibility. Of course, if you stay on top of your stretching, then you will be able to maintain most of it. However, if you don't, then trying to stick with a bike that no longer caters for your new set of bodily limitations will just make cycling painful. Changes can be made to your bike fit. For example, stems can be shortened. Depending on your bike, spaces can be added to the steerer tube underneath the stem, and you could possibly always roll the bars back. All of these things help reduce the reach of the bike. However, do be prepared for all of these changes to result in your bike not feeling the same as it used to, and maybe not for the better. Much like my last point, if you can no longer ride comfortably and you're having to make lots of changes to try and get your bike to fit you, maybe that's the ultimate sign that your bike just isn't right for you anymore. In this instance, I would fully recommend getting a bike fit and learning the full extent of what your limiting factors are, and then finding a bike which is perfectly matched to them. Plus, when you go through that process alongside a bike fitter, if changes do need to be made, they'll be able to make them in a way that doesn't compromise what the bike is actually like to ride itself. N+1 is a pretty well-known rule in cycling. The N, of course, stands for the number of bikes you currently own, and the +1 means that you always need another. However, we might not always need another bike. Quite frankly, sometimes we just want another bike. And in my book, that is a totally justifiable sign that you should get a new one. Perhaps a new model of your current bike has been released and you just want it. That's okay, go and get it. It's your money, and if you want to go and get yourself that new bike, then do it. Nothing beats new bike day, and if there's something out there that you just can't take your eyes off, then do it. Treat yourself and go and enjoy it. There's no doubt that following a training plan is one of the biggest contributing factors to getting faster. However, if you've been training away on your budget-friendly road bike and you're now hitting a plateau in your speed and not really making any considerable steps forwards, perhaps it's now time to consider what you're riding. A new bike can make you faster in a number of ways. This could be down to less weight, improved aerodynamics, increased efficiency, or even just the lowering of your rolling resistance. Without knowing what your individual starting point is, there could potentially be a rather large gain to be had. Of course, it's not just the speed that may increase, but better brakes will allow you to stop later, and improved gearing will mean that you can refine your cadence. Moreover, if you find yourself climbing off a bike which wasn't really designed with speed in mind and then jumping on a bike that was, it's very likely that you're going to be put into a much more aerodynamic position, and that will make a huge difference to how much faster you can go. To reference some of my other points in this video though, just be sure you're not putting yourself in a position that simply isn't right. And if you're not sure what that is, well then go and see a bike fitter. You will not regret it. It's a very obvious thing to say, but people ride bikes literally everywhere, on the road and off of it. Basically, anywhere a human can go, there's a solid chance that a bike can go there too. This then poses the potential situation of a rider wanting to change up where they ride their bike. Perhaps you first fell in love with mountain biking, but now you want to partake in the best discipline, in my opinion, and join the vast number of lycra-clad road cyclists. There's a chance that if you ever did decide to switch disciplines altogether, that you may not want to ride your mountain bike, for example, on the road, or maybe ever again. So that means only one thing: a new bike is in order. Don't get me wrong though, you can ride any bike you like wherever you like, and it's of course possible to make changes to your steed to help it perform better wherever you decide to ride it. But using the right tool for the job is always best. If your bike has been reduced to a pile of snap tubes and scuffed up components, then this is probably the most visible sign that you need a new bike. That goes without saying. Sometimes though, in the unfortunate times when we do crash, our bikes don't always just explode into a number of different pieces. They may dent, they may crack, or they may just bend depending on what material they're made of. If your frame is made out of metal, there's a better chance that it won't crack, and any damage could potentially be repairable. This is obviously entirely case by case dependent. However, with carbon, you have to be a little bit more careful. Cracks can sometimes be harder to spot, and hairline fractures can develop into something a little bit more sinister if they're not dealt with very quickly. If you have crashed a carbon bike, I always recommend making sure that you get it looked at by a carbon fibre specialist to ensure that it really is safe. This is why I'm personally a pretty big fan of metal frames. You know where you stand with them. My advice here really is not to take any risks. If you're unsure about the roadworthiness of your bike, then go and get it checked out by a professional. It's not uncommon for cyclists to own their bikes for a really long time. In fact, I know for sure that a lot of you will have owned your bikes for around 10 years, potentially even 20 plus. And in that time, there will have been countless innovations and upgrades to group sets, frames, wheels, and tyres. The list really is endless. This results in one thing: that tech does become outdated. Now, I'm not here to say whether or not newer tech is better than what it's replacing, but if you subscribe to the idea that cycling tech is getting better, then you'll also agree that tech does get outdated. If you find yourself looking at your bike and wondering what the current crop of bikes really do offer people, then head down to your local bike shop and give a bike a test ride. You might find that you like what you ride, and you could be in for a surprise with how much things have changed. Perhaps those disc brakes that you've been complaining about but have never tried might not be that bad after all. This video really is just a bit of fun, and it's totally up to you on when you want to buy a new bike. It's your money and you don't need me or anyone else telling you how to spend it. These are just a few reasons that are worth paying attention to that may indicate that it's time to consider your options. Let me know down below, what was it that made you decide to buy your last bike? If you enjoyed the video, then please do drop it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and I'll see you again very soon.